Let's turn to trade. China creating a united front with India against US tariffs, writing China will firmly stand with India to uphold the multilateral trading system with the World Trade Organization at its core. Joining us now, Kate Kalutkiewicz, the former White House trade official. Kate, can we just sit on that statement? I'd love your reaction to that. China will firmly stand with India to uphold the multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core. The irony. Kate, your reaction, please.
Yeah, I'm struggling not to laugh out loud. China likes to try to win this sort of rhetoric game, and the irony indeed of China, which really has been, of course, the source of the downfall of the WTO, trying now to lead is something I think the U.S. was probably chuckling at, won't respond to.
Kate, do you think they need to get the Europeans on side? And I'm talking about the US here. For a long time, China has benefited from the rest of the world being open and them being relatively closed. And this is something that successive US administrations have tried to do something about. And the Europeans have struggled to get on board with the United States. Do you think it's different this time around?
I do think it's different this time around. We've steadily seen a change in other countries, particularly the Europeans, being more willing to confront the Chinese economic challenges more directly, moving from calling China a competitor to a really strategic problem. And of course, you've seen in these trade framework agreements the Trump administration has struck with a number of countries, provisions around economic security. And that's really code words covering provisions really directed at China, transshipment, export controls, things that are really aimed at cutting this relationship economically between our trading partners and China. This is a dramatic change.
Kate, what does it look like, though, if you have a China who is more willing to take in and stand by the likes of India? What does that look like, and what does it mean for negotiations already underway or pauses underway between U.S. and China trade talks?
Well, I'd actually look at it in the lens of the U.S. and India. I look at the countries that are willing to sidle up next to China. I'd argue that's probably a losing prospect. China is not in it to support India. China is in it to fight the United States. I think that's a losing position for India. It would be a losing position for Brazil. And I think probably long term, we will see that start to fracture. China is not going to defend India's interests long term. It's going to look out for itself.
Well, at the same time, in the background of all of this, you have the U.S. Part of their approach to India has been that of Russian oil. Notably, they haven't hit out at China on secondary tariffs around Russian oil. Kate, how do you think the U.S. is going to continue to approach this if it is an India that has been stubborn and not willing to change course on that?
It's a great question. I think that this play with India has taken a little bit longer than folks had expected. We were very close, I believe, to a trade deal between the U.S. and India, and a little bit of the stubbornness probably related to India's anger over President Trump declaring, it was he who solved problems with Pakistan and a couple other national security related items. I think this has stymied Modi's ability to maneuver politically within his own country. So I suspect we will see a leader level engagement between the presidents at some time soon. I think it will take that to unstick this relationship. But I do remain relatively positive that we will see an outcome at a very high level that takes down some of the pressure here. It will have to relate somewhat, I think, to India's move away from Russian oil. This has been something the Trump administration has really prioritized recently, which is, outside of the trade lane, but nonetheless could unstick some of the trade problems if India makes some changes the Trump administration is looking for.
To your point, India is one of the last that doesn't have that high-level agreement, and we're starting to kind of understand the contours of what happens after you get that agreement with yesterday newly published version of U.S. and EU trade. Kate, it's not yet a legally enforceable pact. It's certainly a step towards one. How far are we from definitive certainty when it comes to trade for places where we have gotten those agreements?
Right. These agreements, which, are announced with a lot of pomp and circumstance, sometimes lack detail. We are still seeing a lack of legal detail. If you read the joint statement, you'll see very careful language around intends and will move towards. We're far away from some of the legally binding language, I think, that companies would like to see for certainty. But nonetheless, yesterday's statement, I think, is among one of the more detailed joint statements, laying out exactly what both sides expect to do going forward. We're at a fairly dramatic turning point in the transatlantic relationship. You know, we had a president who said the EU was created to screw the United States, and now we see all of these shows of camaraderie, not only the meetings at the White House earlier in the week, but this trade framework, which signifies a win on both sides.